I have seen a lot in my 43 years on the bench. I have watched people lie with the conviction of a revival preacher, cry tears that would not fool a child, and try every trick from bribery to begging to make the law bend in their direction. I have been called names I would not repeat at a family dinner. I have been threatened by men who thought their money made them bulletproof. I have had defendants promise to have me fired, to have me investigated, to have me removed. But I have never in all my decades wearing this robe had a man stand up during his own sentencing, slam both palms on the defense table so hard the water glass jumped, point his finger at me and say, "I will buy this courthouse and I will turn it into a parking garage," until the morning of November 17th, 2025, at exactly 9:47 a.m., when Colton Reeves Stratton, president and CEO of Stratton Apex Development Group, a man who had built over $2.3 billion worth of commercial real estate across the eastern seaboard, made that threat in front of 46 witnesses, 2 armed bailiffs, and a court reporter who typed every single word. He was in handcuffs before his finger came down. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what I am about to tell you started with a community garden and ended with a man being dragged out of my courtroom while his $9,000 suit scraped against the floor. Let me take you back. The case file was case number 2025-CV10847, fraud, destruction of public property, violation of municipal land use ordinances, and intimidation. The defendant was Colton Reeves Stratton, age 51, self-described apex predator of East Coast development, a phrase he had actually used in a magazine interview. His company, Stratton Apex Development Group, had built luxury condominiums, commercial towers, and mixed-use complexes from Boston to Charlotte. His net worth was estimated at $720 million. He was on the board of 3 banks. He had a 12,000-square-foot home in Barrington, a ski lodge in Stowe, and a 78-foot yacht called Apex, docked in Newport. The complainant was the city of Providence, represented by the Municipal Land Use Division, based on a complaint filed by a woman named Josephine Clara Ferreira, age 81. Let me tell you about Josephine. If you understand Josephine, you understand everything. Josephine Clara Ferreira was born on Federal Hill in Providence in 1944, the daughter of a Portuguese fisherman and a seamstress. She grew up in a 3-decker on Spruce Street, where the walls were thin and the meals were big, and everybody knew everybody and nobody locked their doors. She married Manny Ferreira in 1965. Manny was a bricklayer and a Korean War veteran who had served with the 7th Infantry Division at the Chosin Reservoir, one of the most brutal engagements in American military history. Manny came home with frostbite scars on both feet and a Distinguished Service Cross that he kept in a cigar box because he said the men who did not come home deserved the medals more than he did. Manny and Josephine raised 4 children in that 3-decker. He laid brick. She worked at a jewelry factory on Atwells Avenue polishing silver for 23 years. They were not rich. They were never rich. But they were rooted. In 1987, Josephine did something that changed her neighborhood. She took a vacant lot on the corner of Spruce and Tell Street, full of broken glass and garbage, and asked the city for permission to turn it into a community garden. She got it. She spent 3 weekends clearing the lot with Manny and their kids and neighbors. They hauled out 17 truckloads of debris. Manny built raised beds from salvaged lumber. Josephine planted tomatoes. By 2025, the Spruce Street Community Garden had 62 plots tended by families from 11 countries. It had a gazebo built by the neighborhood for Josephine's 75th birthday. It had a bronze plaque, planted by Josephine Ferreira, 1987, grown by the neighborhood, forever. It was the heart of Federal Hill. Manny passed away in 2016 from complications related to his service. He was 84. Josephine tended his plot in the garden every day after he died. She grew his tomatoes. She grew his basil. She talked to him while she worked, the way she had talked to him for 51 years of marriage. She said it helped. She said the tomatoes listened better than Manny ever did. She had $6,200 in savings. She lived in the same 3-decker second floor where the walls were still thin, but the meals were smaller now because she was cooking for one. When Josephine walked into my courtroom that November morning, I knew her. Not personally, but I knew her the way you know someone from your own neighborhood, from your own story. She was small, barely 5 feet, in a dark skirt and a white blouse with a cardigan over it. Her hair was white and pulled back. Her hands were the hands of a woman who had polished silver for 23 years and pulled weeds for 38 more. Strong, sure, weathered. She carried a canvas tote bag with a floral pattern on it. Inside were her documents. She sat in the front row and placed the bag in her lap and folded her hands on top of it and looked at me with dark eyes that were calm and patient and absolutely unafraid. Behind her sat 27 people, garden members, neighbors, 3 generations of Federal Hill, a man in a VFW cap who had served with Manny in Korea, 2 teenage girls who tended a plot together every summer, a Liberian grandmother named Agnes who grew peppers, a retired teacher who grew sunflowers. They filled 3 rows. Some held small signs that said, "Save our garden." If you have ever grown something with your own hands, if you have ever watched a community come together over dirt and seeds and sweat, if the idea of a man bulldozing a garden that a woman built from nothing makes you want to stand up and fight, then subscribe right now. We are a family here. We protect the things that matter. Join us. Here is what Colton Stratton did. In March of 2025, Stratton Apex Development Group purchased a row of commercial properties on Tell Street, adjacent to the Spruce Street Community Garden. The purchase was part of a plan to build a 14-story luxury condominium tower with ground floor retail, estimated value $89 million. The garden was not part of the purchase. The garden sat on city-owned land with a perpetual community use agreement granted in 1992 and renewed in 2012. It was protected. Or it should have been. On the morning of June 4, 2025, at 5:15 a.m., a Stratton Apex construction crew arrived with a backhoe, 2 dump trucks, and a bulldozer. Without a permit, without notice, they tore up the garden. 62 raised beds ripped out, the gazebo crushed, 38 years of growth destroyed in less than 2 hours. The debris, including the bronze plaque, was hauled to a landfill. When Josephine arrived at 7:30 a.m., the garden was gone. Scraped dirt. She did not cry. She told me this from the witness stand. I did not cry because I was too angry to cry. She called the city. She called the police. By noon, 40 people were standing at the edge of that lot. Agnes, a Liberian grandmother, brought peppers from home and placed them on the dirt where her plot used to be. She said, "He can take the garden, but he cannot take the seeds." Officer Denise Callahan, badge number 7214, filed a report. The City Land Use Office confirmed that no demolition permit had been issued. The Attorney General opened an investigation the same week. Drop a comment right now. Like this video if you believe that a community garden built by a veteran's widow should be untouchable. Because what happened in my courtroom is the reason Colton Stratton wishes he had never heard of Spruce Street. November 17, 2025, Courtroom 3. First snow of the season outside, just flurries, but enough to make the world look like it was trying to start over. Colton Stratton arrived at 9:30 a.m., 17 minutes late, which I noted. He walked in like the room owed him an apology for existing. He was wearing a charcoal Brioni suit, $9,000, with a black turtleneck underneath, the developer as visionary look. His watch was a Richard Mille RM011, retail approximately $190,000. His shoes were Berluti Alessandro, $2,800. His attorney was Victoria Keene from a real estate litigation firm in Manhattan. She carried a slim Prada briefcase. Behind them sat a paralegal and an architectural consultant holding a rendering of the proposed tower. Josephine was already there. Dark skirt, white blouse, canvas tote, 27 people behind her. The Korean War veteran in his VFW cap. Agnes with a small pepper plant in a clay pot on her lap that she had brought because she was Agnes, and that is what Agnes did. Before we continue, if you are still with me, you are the reason this channel matters. Subscribe. What happens next is why Colton Stratton was escorted out in handcuffs. I called the case. The city presented the evidence, the community use agreement, the absence of any demolition permit, the construction crew's work orders traced directly to Stratton Apex, the security camera footage from a neighboring business showing the backhoe arriving at 5:15 a.m. Josephine testified. She described building the garden in 1987. She described the 17 truckloads of debris. She described Manny building the raised beds. She described 38 years of growing. And she described arriving that morning and finding nothing. Her voice did not crack. It was steady and clear, and it carried the weight of a woman who had survived worse than Colton Stratton. When she mentioned Manny's plot, she paused for one beat, pressed her hand flat on the witness stand, and said, "That was where I talked to my husband. That is where he still was." Then she continued. The courtroom was silent. Then Colton Stratton stood. Victoria Keene rose first. Stratton put his hand on her arm. "Vic, I have built a $2.3 billion company by being direct. Let me be direct." He stood, tugged his turtleneck, and addressed me with the energy of a man giving a TED Talk he had not been invited to give. "Your Honor, I want to provide context. The Spruce Street site is adjacent to an $89 million development that will bring 280 residential units, 14,000 square feet of retail, and over 200 construction jobs to Federal Hill. The community garden, while charming, was occupying land in one of the most valuable development corridors in Providence. My team made an operational error in proceeding without permits, and I take responsibility for that. We are prepared to offer the Garden Association a relocation package, a new site, new beds, new gazebo, fully funded, at a property 3 blocks away. I asked him if he had consulted the garden members before demolishing their garden. He said, "We intended to engage the community after the site preparation was complete." I asked him about the 5:15 a.m. start time. He said, "Construction in urban settings often begins early to minimize disruption." I asked him if destroying a garden at 5 a.m. without telling anyone seemed like minimizing disruption. Victoria Keene touched his arm. He ignored her. He said, "Your Honor, I understand there are feelings involved, but this is a development matter, not an emotional one. The city benefits from economic growth. A community garden does not generate tax revenue. A $89 million tower does. I am offering a fair relocation at my expense. I think that is more than reasonable." I asked him about the bronze plaque, the one that said "Planted by Josephine Ferreira, 1987. I asked if his crew had preserved it. He paused. "I am not certain what happened to the plaque." I said, "It is in a landfill, Mr. Stratton. Your crew threw it in a dump truck with the tomatoes." He did not respond. Then I asked him if he understood that the community use agreement was a legally binding document. He smiled slightly. "Your Honor, community use agreements are renegotiable instruments. My legal team has identified several pathways to—" I stopped him. I said, "Mr. Stratton, the agreement was not renegotiated. Your crew arrived before dawn and bulldozed the garden without legal authority." And Colton Stratton, $720 million in net worth, looked at me and said, "Your Honor, let me be blunt. That garden was a patch of dirt with vegetables. I am building the future of this neighborhood. In 5 years, nobody will remember that garden. They will remember the tower." Let me say that again. A patch of dirt with vegetables. 38 years, 62 families, a gazebo built by hand for a woman's 75th birthday, a plaque at the entrance, a Korean War veteran's raised beds, Agnes's peppers from seeds she brought from Liberia, Manny's tomatoes that Josephine talked to every morning, a patch of dirt with vegetables. My bailiff Marcus, former Marine, took 2 steps forward. Victoria Keene closed her eyes. I felt something beyond anger. I felt the kind of clarity that comes when you know exactly what needs to happen next. I thought of my father, who came to Federal Hill, this very neighborhood, from a village in southern Italy with nothing, who planted tomatoes in a wooden box on the fire escape of his first apartment, because he said a man who can grow his own food is never truly poor, who told me, "A garden is not a thing, it is a promise, between the person and the earth, between the family and the neighborhood. You do not destroy a promise. I took a breath. Dorothy handed me a sealed filing from the Attorney General's office and the FBI. A 10-month investigation into Stratton Apex had uncovered a pattern of preemptive demolition, unauthorized destruction of structures and community features before permits were obtained, creating conditions that made development approval more likely. 11 incidents across 3 states over 7 years. In 4 cases, the demolished structures were on land Stratton did not own. False permits had been filed in 3 cases. Total damages, $6.8 million. Additionally, $210,000 in payments had flowed from Stratton to 2 Providence zoning board members through a shell company called Apex Urban Solutions, LLC, which had no employees and no function other than moving money. Stratton's composure cracked for the first time. Victoria Keene whispered urgently. He shook his head. The courtroom doors opened. A man walked in wearing work boots, jeans, and a heavy jacket. His name was Frank DeLuca, the foreman of the construction crew that had demolished the Spruce Street Garden. He had been fired by Stratton after the investigation became public. He had been cooperating with federal investigators for 3 months. He sat at the prosecutor's table and placed a binder on the surface. Inside were work orders signed by Stratton himself dated June 1st, 3 days before the demolition, with a handwritten note in the margin. 5 a.m. start, no community contact, clear sight before anyone notices. His own foreman, with the signed orders. The courtroom was so still I could hear Agnes's pepper plant rustling as her hands trembled. I delivered my ruling. Mr. Stratton, I am ordering the full restoration of the Spruce Street Community Garden at your sole expense. Every raised bed, the gazebo, the plaque, the soil. If the original plaque cannot be recovered, you will commission a new one with the original inscription. The garden will be restored to its exact prior condition within 120 days. Victoria Keene did not stand. I am fining you $50,000 personally. Every cent goes to the Spruce Street Garden Association to fund operations, equipment, and expansion. Additionally, you are sentenced to 500 hours of community service. You will serve them in the garden. You will build raised beds. You will haul soil. You will plant what Josephine Ferreira tells you to plant. You will work beside the families whose plots you destroyed, and you will understand what 38 years of growth looks like from your knees in the dirt. I looked at him. Furthermore, I am referring the evidence of preemptive demolitions, zoning board bribery, and fraudulent permits to the United States Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. Your development licenses in Rhode Island are suspended immediately. I paused. Mr. Stratton, you called the Spruce Street Garden a patch of dirt with vegetables. Let me tell you what that patch of dirt was. It was 62 families growing food together. It was a Korean War veteran building raised beds from salvaged wood. It was a Liberian grandmother planting peppers from seeds she carried across an ocean. It was a plaque that honored a woman who cleared 17 truckloads of garbage with her bare hands. It was where Josephine Ferreira talked to her dead husband every morning. That is not a patch of dirt. That is sacred ground. And you bulldozed it at 5 a.m. so nobody would notice. And that is when it happened. Colton Stratton, who had been reddening through the entire ruling, stood up. He slammed both palms on the defense table. The water glass jumped. Victoria Keene grabbed his arm. He shook her off. He pointed his finger at me. And he said, loud enough for the court reporter and every person in that room and every microphone to capture, "This is a joke. You are a joke. I will buy this courthouse and I will turn it into a parking garage. You think a garden matters more than an $89 million building? You are out of your mind. I will have you removed from this bench by Friday." The courtroom detonated. Not erupted. Detonated. Marcus moved before the echo died. He was behind Stratton in 2 strides. My second bailiff moved to Stratton's left. I said, "Mr. Stratton, you are in criminal contempt of this court. You have threatened a sitting judge. 60 days. Adult correctional institutions. Bailiffs, take Mr. Stratton into custody." The handcuffs came out. Stratton thrashed. "Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am?" Marcus said, "Sir, stop resisting." Stratton kicked the defense table. The architectural rendering toppled off its easel and landed face down. He was brought to the ground. Handcuffs on. They pulled him up. His $9,000 Brioni was wrinkled. His Berlutis scraped the floor as he was dragged toward the side door. He was shouting. Nobody was listening. The 27 garden members were standing. Agnes held her pepper plant against her chest. The Korean War veteran in the VFW cap nodded once, slowly. Josephine Ferreira sat in her chair, hands folded on her canvas tote, and she watched Colton Stratton get dragged out of the courtroom with the same calm, patient, unafraid expression she had worn when she walked in. She did not say a word. She did not need to. The garden had already won. Smash that like button if justice was served. 7 months later, Colton Reeves Stratton was indicted on 29 federal counts, including fraud, bribery, destruction of public property, and racketeering. Guilty on 24. Sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. Stratton Apex Development Group was placed under federal receivership. The 2 zoning board members were charged separately and removed from office. Frank DeLuca received probation for his cooperation. Victoria Keene was cleared of wrongdoing. The $89 million tower was never built, and the Spruce Street Community Garden? It came back. Restoration completed in 94 days. 62 beds rebuilt. Gazebo rebuilt. A new bronze plaque installed with the original inscription and a new line. Destroyed June 4, 2025. Restored by the community, November 2025. You cannot bulldoze a promise. The city granted a permanent conservation easement. No one can ever build on it again. Agnes replanted her peppers. The Korean War veteran rebuilt his beds. And Josephine walked into the restored garden on opening morning, went to Manny's plot, knelt in the dirt, and planted a tomato seedling. She talked to him while she did it, told him the garden was back, told him the tomatoes would be better this year because the new soil was richer. Then she stood, brushed the dirt off her knees, and went home to make lunch. I think about that morning, and I think about what Colton Stratton said. In 5 years, nobody will remember that garden. He was wrong. The garden is there. The tower is not. The plaque is there. He is in prison. And Josephine Ferreira, 81 years old, is still growing tomatoes. My father used to tell me, a garden is a promise between the person and the earth. Colton Stratton broke that promise with a backhoe at 5 a.m. But promises, like tomatoes, grow back. To anyone watching who builds, develops, or profits from land, remember that before you owned it, someone loved it. Before it was a corridor, it was a community. And before you send the backhoe, ask who planted the tomatoes. And to anyone who has built something beautiful with their own hands, a garden, a mural, a neighborhood, a life, and had someone try to destroy it, keep planting. They can bulldoze the beds. They cannot bulldoze the seeds. Thank you for watching this to the very end. If you believe in real justice, do 3 things. Subscribe so these stories find every neighborhood that needs them. Leave a comment and tell me about a place in your community that means everything to the people who built it. And watch the next video, where a Hollywood agent steals a struggling actress's work, and what the judge reveals about a 15-year secret destroys his entire empire. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that a community garden is worth more than a parking garage. In my courtroom, justice is not just a word, it is a promise, and I keep my promises.